section 9.1, components of statistics studies. So this is just simply intro to statistics. Okay, then let's see what could be in section 9.1. Okay, so this is a kind of definition. Okay, statistics is defined as the study of how to, there's 4 big components for statistics here. And it's all, so you will survey and you will observe and you will organize and then you will analyze the data and then you technically get the numerical information and conclusion at the end, right? Okay, so first you need to collect data. Then you organize the obtained data in certain ways. Then you analyze the result. And from the result, you interpret the result and you will conclude what could be the information that you can have based on your all like statistics study there, okay? Then if you think about it, and in real life, it is impossible to study every single members of entire population, right? It's too big and there's no way that you can get to every single members or, you know, the data from like any population and collect it and everything. So, yeah, there's no way, right? So you perform these statistics studies and instead of just trying to get whole population studies and we take data from a small sample, it's just reasonable, impossible size of sample. I mean, the bigger the sample size is will give us more accurate result, but there must be some limit, right? So the reasonable and possible sample that we get from the population and we get the data and then we call that statistics, okay? Then what's population? Population is defined as the entire group of interest which we wish to describe or draw conclusions about. And what's sample? Sample is a group of units or subjects selected from the population. Okay, so it's gonna have a certain characteristics and the personality of the population, but since it's impossible for us to study every single one in the entire population, we will have a sample out of that big group, the population, right? Then what's census? Census is surveying the entire population. And what's the most famous census that we know? No, I think there is a certain year that the whole
because this is birthday today.
I know.
Bye.
Did you call him?
okay,
Okay.
I know where your mic.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I was confused. I thought you're answering my question or asking me any question, but it's okay. Okay. So the census, you know, as you remember, the whole country is, you know, implementing the census for the population. So I think it was last year, and you get either you get visited by person or you get mail, or I think they started having this census through the online recently. So you're supposed to just describe how many people living in your household and then what kind of ethnicity or nationality that you have, all kinds of that. So especially that's really typical example of census, right? Okay, then what else? So since we defined population and sample separately, and we call parameter as the data from the entire population, and data from the sample is called statistics. And this comparison is very important once we go further, and we will utilize some kind of formulas, like formulas that comes from the entire population or the sample. And it's mainly the same structure, but there's some details different when you use the formula, okay? So again, for the terminology, you need to know this terminology, the comparison, in order to do the 10 problems of the practice problem under this section. So we call parameter as the data from the entire population. And as statistics, it's gonna be still data, but it's only gonna conduct it from the sample, a certain unit or certain smaller size of group from the population. Okay, then what else do we need to know? Okay, so I'm emphasizing the parameter and statistics in here. Okay, so then in order to conduct the study over the sample, there must be some principle how we can create the sample from the population. And there's all 6 types of techniques that you can make samples for your statistics studies here. So there's a slight different the terminology, and I think you heard from the UC Scout video that you already watched. It's just random sampling, but it's slightly different, and then it's gonna be the same thing. It's called here, it's a simple random sample. So the first one is just literally, it's just randomly selected for the sample. And there's another method to create a sample. It's a systematic sample. So what's a systematic sampling? Those members, the elements of the sample will be chosen using a certain pattern, right? And then for the example is just, you will conduct it in the line, and you will only just pick every other person in the line or something like that, every 5, the positions or something like that. And there's another one, it's a stratified sample, and that involves what population is first divided into groups, and then the members are randomly chosen from each group. So this one is a little bit more complicated way to select the samples, right? And there's 3 more, and there's a one that's called a cluster sample. So this is it's the same thing with the previous one, but divided into groups, and the sample of the groups is randomly chosen. So then you will choose the one of the groups that you divided already, right? And what's a convenience sample? It's just members are chosen because they're easily accessible. That means, you will not conduct sampling separately, but if you have any event, the people just, it's already there, and you can conveniently choose the sample with the whole group that they are already there, right? So that's why it's called convenience. And what's self-selected sample, and terminology-wise in the UC Scout video, and then they call it voluntary. So it's the same thing, like the meaning of the voluntary is just, self-selected. So members volunteer to participate. And I think this one, could be any statistics that, for example, if the medical organization wants to conduct a certain statistics studies and they advertise their studies, and sometimes there's some even rewards, right? Then some people who want to be part of the studies, and then they will just apply, and then they get selected, and then they conduct that medical statistics studies kind of thing, right? Okay, so this all 6 sampling techniques you need to know. And some of the problems in the practice problem is asking which type of sampling techniques is used for the context or something, right? Okay, so here's 6 different techniques. Okay, then once you have the sample, and then with the sample, your goal is you will get the result, right? And the result will be either means or proportion. Means is literally the average. So you will collect all the data and you will get the average out of all the data. And there's another way to get the result is proportions. Proportion is usually, typically you will have the percentage. Proportion is fraction, and from the fraction, you convert the fraction into the percentage. So there's 2 different types of result. And in order to get this result, what do? You either experiment the sample with a certain purpose, or you simply observe what's happening within the sample group. So the conducting method is either experiment. If that's what you do for your purpose, if you do something, right? Then observational studies, it's just you don't do any manipulation within the sample, but you just simply observe for your purpose. So that's the 2 different kinds of the study method, okay? So then let's see the examples here. Okay, example number 1. The campaign step for a state politician wants to know how voters in the state feel about a number of issues, and classify each sample with the sampling method here. So A, they call every 50th person on a list of registered voters in the state. And then the B type is they randomly select 100 voters from each county to call. And the method C, in order to make sample, is they ask every person who comes to the next campaign rally to fill out a survey. So take a moment throughout whole 6 method that we just discussed, and then guess which one is which. What could be the method for A? What could be the method called B? And then what could be the method called for C? So the A, they call every 50th person on a list of registered voters in the state. So that could be falling into the method systemic. Yeah, there you go. There you go, yeah. Okay, so systemic, and the B could be random, yeah. And C, convenience. Okay, then let's see. Okay, so B is randomly select 100 voters. So it sounds like a random sample because it's saying random, but we cannot ignore the part each county, right? So we divide the groups, the county by county. So maybe it's more specifically, it could be stratified sample. Okay, do you see the difference there? Okay, then what about C? Yeah, that's a convenience because they just wait until the event happening, right? So there's gonna be campaign rally anyway, right? And then people will gather together for the rally, then they can conveniently make the sample with the people within the campaign rally. So the twist for B, and it's still random, but since there's a little more detail that it comes from county, so county can be the divided groups. So it's not just randomly directly from the population, and there's one more step behind, which is the divided group. So the B could be stratified, not just random. So that's the difference. Is it clear now? Okay, cool. Okay, then one more example. So now the context is saying, the study that we are conducting is this. A survey was taken based on a national sampling of 1,000 teenagers selected at random from all US teenagers who have a driver's license. The findings of the survey shows that 54% of teenage drivers receive a moving violation within the first year of obtaining their driver's license. So this context describes the entire study all about, okay? Then here, what's the population? All the teenagers in the US that have the driver's license. Okay, then population defined in any teenagers in USA and have driver's license. But they didn't conduct the census for this whole population. They did make samples. So what could be the sample here? The sample, so they choose 1,000 teenagers, right? Oh, there's a typo. Not 100 selected teenagers. I will correct that later. So the sample is 1,000. So it's, let me correct it here. So this is 1,000 selected teenagers with driver's license. So that's the sample, right? So now we see the difference between population and sample here. So sample is 1,000 selected teenagers. So that's right here, right? And what was sampling technique? Yeah, this is random sample. They didn't really initially divided any group. It's just any teenagers who lived in USA and who obtained the driver's license, and then they randomly sample 1,000 teenagers within the category. And then there's no previous steps that dividing any, there's no dividing any different kind of, the driver's license group, right? So this could be defined as just simple random sampling, right? Okay, then what's next? Then in this case, what could be parameter? So parameter is the data from the population, right? Then parameter in this case is US teenagers received a moving violation within the first year of driver's license obtained. Then the last one is asking, what's the study method? So study method is either answer, is it experimental or observational? So which one is it? Yeah, it's simply observed. They didn't conduct any experiments. They just simply, how many teenagers who got the driver's license would get moving violation within first year, right? How many out of that 1,000 teenagers within the categories in the sample? So it's just, you simply observe, you just count how many, right? Then what was the result that they presented here? So now we can see, they say the results that they found out is 54%, right? So what was the two different kinds of the result presentation? Either mean, which takes the average, or the proportion, which takes the percent. So it's obviously they present their result as a percentage. So that's proportion here, proportion. So that's the result method that they presented. So very similar way of problem on practice problems here. So while you're reading the context given in the direction, and these things are simply being asked, so that's what you need to answer, okay? So you will see similar problems on the practice problem. Okay, so that's all we need to know from 9.1, and you're ready to go try practice problem if you haven't, okay? So once